Hi, Dad. This video is for you. This is a very rough and likely inaccurate food web. This is for illustrative purposes. This is not a scientific document. And this is going to be a basic lesson in biology and why I think we are not doing enough to address the climate change, because we had a bit of this conversation the other day, and when I said that we weren't doing enough, you seemed to be kind of upset, and you turned off and you withdrew. And that's bothered us, because you are a human, you live on this planet, you share it with the rest of us, and because of that, you are responsible in your own way for this planet. So I want to give you a bit of education on what's going on right now in terms of climate change in some very basic high-level ways, what the big problem on the horizon is, and what you can do about it as an individual and as a member of the global community. So, you've probably learned this stuff in elementary school or whatever, I hope so at least. Everything relies on the sun. At the end of the day, almost all of the life on this planet comes directly, it's all energy. It's being transferred from the sun. It's collected by the plants. We have berry bushes, grains, trees, a bunch of different types of flowering plants, so bird pollinated, beetle pollinated, or generalist pollinated, butterfly pollinated, and we have algae. And there's lots of other things that do photosynthesis. Cyanobacteria, which I didn't put on here, they do process energy directly from things like thermal vents, from hot springs, but they are a percentage of a percentage of a percentage of the life on this planet that gets stuff that way. They are the foundation of some very tiny ecosystems, not the ecosystems we rely on. So I'm not including them in this analysis. So first we have the photosynthesizers. They take the energy from the sun and they convert it primarily into starches, sugars, proteins. And this is what the more complicated life can use. So we have like the protozoa, the plankton, the little tiny creatures that live in the ocean. And this is the foundation of the food web in the ocean. So smaller fish, like sardines, I assume, I don't know, they eat these things. Or even some big fish, whales, not really fish, mammals. Whales, they eat the plankton. When the whale dies, when any fish dies, you get the scavengers, a lot of crabs, shrimp, worms, other fish. They eat this, the protozoa eat it, bacteria eats it, the fungus eats it. The smaller fish are eaten by the bigger fish, and we eat all the fish. You'll notice I have arrows kind of going in one way if the thing it's pointing to eats it, two ways if there's a reciprocal relationship. So when it comes to these flowering plants and trees and whatnot, there's a reciprocal relationship between the pollinator, so butterflies, beetles, birds, these are kind of the major ones, lots of other, bees, flies, ants even, all sorts of creatures do pollination, bats. There's a reciprocal relationship because the butterfly eats the pollen, but it also spreads the pollen, and this allows the plant to survive, for the species to reproduce. Birds, in a very similar situation, some of them pollinate, like hummingbirds. There's a lot of flowers that are specialized to be pollinated by hummingbirds, but seed dispersal is kind of the primary form in that reciprocal relationship. The bird eats the berry, poops it out somewhere, new plant grows. This is how the plants increase their range. I didn't connect birds and humans. That's fine. Deer, they eat the berries, they eat the trees, they eat the grass. Cows, they only eat grain, right? They can eat grass. We can feed them grass, but 90%, maybe 98%. I don't, you can Google these numbers. That's the other thing, is I talk in general terms because you have the power to educate yourself. You have access to the largest body of information in human history, and all it takes is opening a web page. You can learn anything, right? This is why I get frustrated with people who are older than me, is because you guys didn't grow up with this, right? You didn't grow up with this attitude of all the information at your fingertips, so you don't really know how to use it. Maybe that'll be a different video. I can teach you guys how to think in order to best use the data that is right there. Because that is something I have noticed with you, Father, and with, like Jaja, with my grandparents. So you have a very passive habit of information consumption, and that can get you in a lot of trouble. Because our world is filled with so much misinformation. You need to have a active information habit. You need to be seeking truth, otherwise you'll be caught in lies. See your views on Gaza as an example of being passively fed bad information. And then you got apex predators like wolves. They eat the deer. Fungus eats everything. Humans, you will note, are not at the top of this food chain. I didn't put bacteria up there, but bacteria should be up there. Fungus is up there. They eat us. I think this isn't a chain. I'm sorry, this is a food web. So there's not really a top bottom. It's all interconnected. It's all one big spaghetti mess. But which is to say, humans are not at the top of anything. I think this is something that older generations struggle with, because we, especially in Christianity, we're taught that God made the earth for us, rather than that God made the earth, which we are a part of. It's a subtle but important distinction for how you view the world and how you interact with it. So, yeah, real basic stuff. I'm sure you know this. Everything's connected, food web, whatnot. So what's the problem? The problem is we are on the precipice, and when I say precipice, I mean 20 years, 50 years, somewhere in that range, of a cascading collapse of this food web. And you will note, humans, we need a lot of stuff. We need the grains too. We need the trees, not just for like nice things like maple syrup, but that's how we build our houses. That's how we heat. A lot of people heat their homes. That's how we make tools. And we eat the birds, we eat the cow, we eat the deer, we eat the tuna and the sardines and some of the whale. We even eat some of the algae and the crabs and the flowers and the berry bushes. So we rely on a lot of stuff to be healthy, to be happy, to be alive. And this is just talking about food, right? We're not talking about the oxygen we breathe, the water we need to drink. Because like trees are incredibly important in the water cycle. They generate rain through aspiration. They take the water up out of the ground, and when they're doing photosynthesis, water gets released from their leaves into the air, and that helps form clouds. So when you cut down a forest, you will reduce the amount of rain in that region. So our deforestation is not only affecting carbon capture and carbon sequestration and oxygen production, it is also affecting the planet's ability to create rain, which is so necessary for watering everything. So the collapse is happening here in the pink. it's also happening here in the green. Why? Two things. Pesticides and monocultures. Monocultures, practice of farming, industrialized farming, where you have hundreds and hundreds of acres where you grow one thing: soybeans, corn, cabbage. This is how farming gets done. It's mostly corn and soybeans these days. Why? Because what's the number? I think it's about 90%. It's either 80 or 90% of the soybeans we grow goes not to humans, but to cows, to goats, to chickens, to create the feed for these animals, which we then eat. And I will note that this is a very energy inefficient process, right? Each step of this web, you lose a bit of energy. So, the plants start from converting, I don't know what the efficiency of photosynthesis is, so I'm going to pull this number out of my butt. Let's say 80%. 80% of the sunlight that hits the grass that makes the grain gets converted into usable starches, usable sugars, usable proteins, whatever. Then you take it to the cow, maybe 20%. Maybe 20% of that gets converted into something usable that humans can eat. This goes for water too, right? Cows take up an inordinate amount of water to keep alive, not just because they drink a lot of water, but because it requires a lot of water to grow the feed you need to feed them. As an example, to keep 10 chickens alive for a year, you need 5 acres of grains. And you have to grow different things so they get their complete nutrients. That's a lot of land to keep those chickens alive, to have eggs year-round. So, a lot of these things, a lot of the base stuff, the photosynthesizers, are gone now and have been replaced with exclusively grains. And this is, when they talk about water shortages in like the Southwest, up by California, Nevada, that sort of thing, the Rio Grande drying up. This is why. Is because we have deforested, we have destroyed the prairies and the plains, which were good at letting water seep into the ground, recharging groundwater aquifers, and replace them with these very, very thirsty grain fields. So we have to keep pumping out more and more water, and now we are running out. And it is, it's terribly inefficient. Like I said earlier, so that's the problem with monoculture. And then pesticides. So huge amount of pesticides gets used in growing these grain fields. Why? Because this is weak, right? This simple system of sun to grain to cow to humans is very weak. Diversity, complexity breeds resilience. Because if something goes wrong here, the whole chain falters. If you want an analogy, you can look at supply chains and how we've been having so many supply chain issues recently. With shipping accidents happening in the just-in-time supply, where everything has to go right to get your stuff on time and at the price you required. And if one thing goes wrong, that whole system gets thrown out of whack. And we're still recovering from COVID, economically speaking, even though it's still going on, but from the shutdown that we all went through. Because these supply chains were disrupted, and now we're seeing a shift in the economy of returning, of moving away from this kind of globalized trade, moving away from this just-in-time supply and shipping, because people have realized how fragile that system is. We need to make a similar shift in our view of the ecology of this planet. Because what's happening? The bugs are dying. I'm sure as a child you remembered all of the fireflies and how pretty they were. I certainly did. I certainly remembered seeing a lot of fireflies. I remember you saying that there were less fireflies when I was a kid than when you were a kid. And now there are almost no fireflies, you know? You might I've seen one or two out at Mom's place in the past few years. But they're all gone. Most of them are gone. And this is true not just for fireflies, but for a lot of insects. Their populations have been in very steep decline. And this has been from pesticide use in agriculture, but also domestic pesticide use. People treat their lawns constantly, right? Lawns are very analogous to this monoculture for grain. It is, we take, I don't know, what's The Office. We'll talk about Mom's office. I think that's going to be our example piece of land. I don't know, what is it? It's like 2 acres, 3 acres, something like that. You know, it's a nice little chunk, little parcel. And you got the big meadows in the back, and that's great. I love the meadows. But you have an acre of it that's developed, that is lawns, and just grass grows in those lawns, right? Or, maybe some ornamental plants. Those don't support a lot of life. Not a lot of things can live off just grass, and you're not raising cattle at the office. And it gets treated, pesticides and whatnot. So, the bugs don't have a home anymore. They need, a lot of them need, like dead trees. Dead trees host more life than living trees, right? You get hundreds and hundreds of species of insect that live in dead tree, like in a single dead tree. You go find a dead oak in the woods, it will have more life in it than a living one right next to it. Because the oak has an immune system, right? And so it keeps the insects out until it dies. Birds live in it, bats, raccoons, fungus. Fungus is a major one. Fungus needs things to decompose. A lot of it. Not all of it, but a lot of fungus, unless it's mycorrhizal, and those live off plant roots. But even then, if the trees are gone, if we've clear-cut the trees for a yard or for a field, there's no longer root systems for the mycorrhizal fungi to live off of, to participate in. And that will lock up a lot of nutrients in the soil, because this is how plant roots are mainly for water. They draw on some minerals, some nutrients, but their primary way of getting nutrients from the soil is from fungus, which they trade the fungus. They give them sugars, and they get the minerals and other nutrients out of the soil in return. Corn has some capacity to have a mycorrhizal relationship with a fungus, but not in the same capacity that a black locust tree, right, does. And so, because of all of this, because of the massive use of pesticides, because of the monocultures, we are losing parts of this web. We are losing the butterflies. We're losing the beetles and other insects, right? We are losing the trees and the plants that they pollinate. These are all going away. There's still some around. It's not, the world hasn't ended yet, but we're getting there, right? And now, this is something I was talking to Mom about the other day. Birds. People put up bird feeders because they want to feed them, help them out through the winter, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. The problem is, baby birds don't eat seeds. They need insects because they're high protein, high calorie. In particular, they need caterpillars. A lot of baby birds eat only caterpillars. But the butterflies are disappearing. So there's no caterpillars, which means, you get a mama and papa bird, find a nice bird feeder, a lot of food for them in the winter. This is a great place. There's a lot of food. Let's have some kids. They have some kids, and they go and they look, and there's no worms around. There's no caterpillars around. They don't got anything to feed their kids. Kids starve and die, and that family has now wasted a lot of energy, wasted a mating season, and so because of this, a lot of bird populations are starting to decline. Like the songbirds. Songbirds are starting to go away. And there's certain bird species that aren't so bothered by this, and they can feed their kids other stuff. Like the geese seem to be doing fine, and I think the ducks are doing okay. But the guys that hang out at your bird feeder, your cardinals, your robins, your blue jays, they're struggling. Deer are doing okay, because we got rid of the wolves. There are very few wolves left in America, and every time we try to reintroduce them, they get killed. I'm sure you've seen some news about that. It was like West Virginia or something. They were trying to reintroduce the gray wolf, and they're tracking this population, and like a month later, they got poached. So there's no more wolves there. I forget what state it was. Like the only protected wolf population that succeeded is in what's the national park with the geysers? Yellowstone. In Yellowstone, and some of them have been poached too. So they had a big population boom. They were doing great, and now they're having problems. And so like the deer are doing really well. And this is kind of so we have this collapse where just stuff is disappearing, stuff is dying. Then we have this other problem. Now the deer are out of control. There's way too many deer, and if you go down south, it's feral hogs. There's way too many. They are a nuisance. Like, you get paid to get in a helicopter with an automatic rifle and shoot feral hogs. Like, that's how big of a problem they are. This is like emu war American version. And this, it's bad for the grains. It's bad for the berry bushes. It's bad for the trees. It's bad for all this other stuff I erased. Because there's nothing to keep these populations in check. So they grow and they grow and they grow and they eat everything, they trample everything, and the land doesn't have any time to regenerate. So this is why hunting is important, right? Because now the only thing that keeps the deer population in check are humans, either with a gun or a car. Like, seriously, like, that's the number one predator. We are the deer's number one predator now because of this, because we killed all the wolves. So they're wrecking things, right? Deer are wrecking things. There's no birds to help the berry bushes. The deer go after farmers' crops and whatnot now because, like, that's, it's there, it's available, and there's not a lot of woods left for them to roam around in. Now, if we go to the ocean, algae's doing great. We are pumping in so much nutrients. So another issue with our current agricultural practice is our heavy reliance on petroleum-based fertilizers. We have huge runoff problems. You've probably seen news about this in Lake Erie. I know it certainly had. What lakes are we next to Superior? I think we're right next to Lake Superior here in Rochester. Nutrient runoff creates algae blooms. The algae sucks up all the oxygen in the water, and then all of this dies. Not quite as big of a deal in the ocean, but it'll create dead zones in the ocean, right? And all of this dies because of our farming practices. And again, it's not quite all dead yet, but this is where it's going. This is where the trends are going. The United Nations has like a climate research group, or there's some international climate research group, and they put out a study every year talking about the impacts of climate change, and like, these are the trends they are projecting, right? So this isn't me, doomsaying, right? This is what the smartest scientists in the world are saying about our predicament. And now, unfortunately, humans can't photosynthesize. So we're kind of running out of options about what's going to happen, right? And the big worry at this point is a cascading failure, right? Because you have a complex system, there's a lot of moving parts, and if one piece fails, the other parts can pick up the slack, right? But we've been taking out a lot of pieces over the past 200, 300 years, however long industrialization's been going on, right? We've been taking out a lot of pieces. It's a Jenga tower, right? Now it's starting to look pretty thin. And the thing is, we keep taking out pieces. Eventually, it's going to collapse. And when it does, you're not going to be able to fix it. A lot of people are going to die. I mean, like, climate change is already affecting millions and millions of people. But, like, we're okay for the most part. But when this starts happening, we won't be okay. We won't be okay. We will be the people who die. So, like, that's what's on the horizon for my future. And, you know, as an individual, there's not a lot you can do to restore the food web on your own. But you can do little things to help. Give a little more buffer, buy us a little more time until the powers that be get their act together and start taking this stuff seriously. Right now it's very showmanship kind of stuff, very surface level stuff. Like electric vehicles, not going to solve the problem. If we had, billions invested in mass transit, that would have a pretty good impact, but electrical vehicles are not going to change anything. They are just as resource intensive as gas ones. They might not put out as much carbon, but they have destructive mining for like the lithium and the cobalt that's needed for the batteries. You still have all of the smelting the metal for them, and the rubber for the tires, and all the plastic that goes on the inside, and all the copper for the electronics in them, and it's still a mess, right? It's still a very inefficient system. Our move towards solar, towards renewable, towards solar, towards wind, reinvigorating the nuclear infrastructure, that's good. That's still, but we're not like changing farming practices, right? We still are primarily focused on monocultures, on big industrial farms. We still, like Monsanto controls the seeds, control the Roundup. They lobby the government. They still make a lot of money, and we keep farming this way. So on like a systems level, that's what needs to change. On an individual level, well, what can you do? You can create safe havens. I know our family owns a pretty significant amount of property. Some of it's in homeowners associations, and you're kind of shit out of luck because they have rules, obviously. Unless I would say take on the homeowners association and say we should change the rules to allow us to grow more native species, to allow our yards to grow more wild, and to be havens for this life. But the office, I said that was going to be the parcel we talk about. What can you do there? Don't use pesticides. Don't mow your lawn. Right? Actually, it'd be better if you killed your lawn. Replace it with goldenrod and like milkweed, and I don't know, plant some more trees. Like plant some black locust. Plant. Okay, there's all sorts of things. There's a website. If you Google website for finding local species, you'll get a website that will tell you. You put in your zip code. It'll tell you what species are native to your area, and then you can list them by number of species it supports. Right, like goldenrod is one of the most productive, or if not the most productive flower on that list. It supports like 160 different insect species. And so instead of having crabgrass or Bermuda grass or whatever grass you're growing have goldenrod, right? Now, you'll have a bunch of insects. Birds will start making more babies, right? You'll get more small critters like possums. Possums are great. They eat so many ticks. It's like their favorite treat. Possums great for controlling tick populations. Worried about mosquitoes? Build some bat houses, right? Like this is the mindset we have to take. We have to reinvigorate the land. We have to work with the land. We are not here to dominate it. We are not here to conquer it, because in conquering it, we burn it to the ground and we will be kings of nothing. Like, this is the problem with every war ever. It's like, unless you're trying to do settler colonialism, like they are in Gaza and Palestine, you don't want to burn it down. You want to work with it. You want to live in it. Starting to do things like controlled burns for the meadows. I don't know what's back there. I haven't done a survey, but I bet you there's not a lot of native stuff back there. However, native plants in our region of the world are fire adapted, and most invasive plants are not. So, you do a grass fire, burns out real quickly. Work with the local fire department on this. To do it right, have fire breaks. Take out the wood and the heavy burning stuff, so it just blazes through in a minute, and it's safe. And that'll kill and you do this in the fall or in the winter too, and that'll kill all the invasives and give an advantage to the native species, because the native species here have really deep roots, which are better for carbon sequestration. They're better for water permeability into the soil and water retention, and these deep roots are specifically designed to help them survive fires. They'll grow back, and all the shallow-rooted plants, all the grasses, they'll die off. And the trees won't be hurt, because the grass fire will burn out before it can get hot enough to hurt the trees. Plant local species, plant a diverse amount of species, right? So don't just plant goldenrod. Go look at this list. And this is what I was talking about earlier. This information is at your fingertips. You can go on Google and find this out. And that's why I'm not telling it to you now, because it's very important that you get in the habit of doing this, of looking stuff up yourself and doing your own research, right? It doesn't stop once you get out of school. Kill your lawn. Don't use pesticides. Plant things that support local and indigenous biodiversity on your own property. And the other thing is, like I said, take on the homeowners association, get involved in local politics, right? I bet you your job is really unfulfilling and boring. Like, you shuffle paperwork and deal with shitty insurance companies. You are not a happy person. I've seen the way you live. This is doing something real. This is making a real change in the world. This isn't some do nothing work. This isn't arbitrary papers to fill out because some asshole said so. And this is necessary because, I would like to have a kid. You would have a grandchild. I think that would be cool. But I'm not going to until we figure out this problem, because I don't want to bring a child into this world who is likely to starve. And Grandpa, if you end up watching this video, especially if you make it this far, thank you. I really appreciate you sticking with me. You talked about having hope for the future. That pisses me off, honestly. It makes me really angry, because unless we solve these problems, there isn't any, right? Like, this is what we got to tackle. And I think that being a capitalist, being an industrialist, running a factory, you have contributed to these problems. You, especially being in the plastics business, you are in a very real way partially responsible for what's going on. You have participated in the system that has caused these problems. And, I don't know, maybe, I don't think you're on the board at Kirtland anymore, but maybe you are, maybe you have pull with whoever is. Get the groundskeeper crews to stop using pesticides, right? Maybe, plant meadows in between holes. Like there's a whole another political issue with golf courses in general, but I'm fucking have your golf courses. I'm not here to fight that fight. Um, make sure it's native species growing in the woods. Uh, and like practice some real forestry, practice some real groundskeeping, not we're gonna trim the grass every day. So it's just wasteful. The amount of fuel you spend to do that, the amount of fertilizer you use to do. Like that's the other thing is like if you let the grass grow taller, you don't need as much fertilizer because you're not like killing it constantly. Uh, and, like there's waterways there. All that crap gets washed into Lake Erie. Like that's the watershed you're in. So algae blooms in Lake Erie. Kirtland Country Club is directly contributing to those. Maybe not as much as like a soy farm, but every bit counts. Personal responsibility and all that. So this is like part of why this is one of the many issues that I like. This is what I dedicate my life to is fighting problems like this, right? And this is why I can't talk to you, Dad, is because I don't think you understand that. You get scared by these problems. They're really uncomfortable for you to think about because of the role that you and our family have played in them. And ignorance and complacency is a lot easier than action. And you have other things going on in your life, and so maybe you don't think this is such a big deal. You're going through a divorce, children aren't talking to you, you're probably going to be looking for a new job soon. I don't know, you got kicked out of the house. Like, shit's going on. You're going to need something to sink your teeth into to keep you sane, to keep you happy and healthy. And I want to help you with that. Because this is what saved my life, right? I've been suicidal since high school, right? Partially because of high school, partially because of you, partially because of some other things. But I've seen the way you go out and weed, and I know the peace you find there. Like today, I had a really rough day, cried pretty much all day. But I went out to the farm, went out to Mockingbird, and I weeded. I weeded the memorial garden for like 2 hours. Filled up 2 5-gallon buckets. And it was very healing, very soothing. So I know you have this connection with nature. I think it's why you like golf. It is your way of being out in nature. It's a very manicured and cultivated and kind of fake nature, but it's trees, it's grass, it's green. This is how you get in touch with real nature, is learning about this sort of thing, which is caring about this sort of thing and participating in it. Good way, like the way I got started, was I plant.net, downloaded this app on my phone, and I started learning the plants around me. Learning what was native, what wasn't, what was invasive, what was helpful, what was good for pollinators. Now whenever I go outside, I ID plants. I see a plant I don't know, it's a friend I don't know, I haven't met yet. I ID it. I learn what it is. I learn its name. I learn about its habitat. I learn about its growth habits. And then I figure out, where does it fit into this web? How can it help us? How can I help it? And it is this difference in attitude that is what separates us. It is this difference in understanding that is what separates us. I think I have moved on from a lot of the pain you've caused me. But your unwillingness, your inability to connect with me on topics like this, on topics like Gaza, is a new pain. Because you are someone I care about deeply, and I want you to participate in the thing I have dedicated my life to. I want you to participate in the thing that brings me the most joy, and I want you to participate in the thing that is going to preserve the future for your children and for your grandchildren. And I don't know, if you're lucky, you'll live long enough to be affected by this cascading collapse, and maybe you'll get to experience the food shortages too. Who knows? Um, so I don't know. It was a long video. Probably won't watch it all, but if you do, thank you. I love you. Anyone else in the family who's watched this, I love you too. And while this was a video specifically for my dad, there's lessons in it for all of you. No matter where you are in your life, you can start taking action on this. Not only can you, you must. Especially for those of you who have kids. This is what you gotta do. Yeah. Love you all. Thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. Love one another. Love yourself. I'll catch you next time.